Welcome, guys. This is episode 2 with myself and Stephen Callis launching a full scale investigation and attack into the world of football. Because, frankly, we see so many issues from youth football all the way to first team football in the Champions League. But this episode, primarily, we're going to be looking and focusing on grassroots academy football and seeing how we can help the next generation of players, before the problems start to come out, trying to prevent these things. And frankly, like myself, I have like my experience is playing football in the academies in America, in California. Obviously, Stephen is from the UK, so we'll focus a lot more on the UK in this episode. But Stephen, just to get started, what is your most like your biggest thing that you just hate when you see youth teams or youth coaches, or what's the thing that just annoys you the most?
It's it's coaches that automatically want to go into the mode of Pep Guardiola 2.0. And when I say this, this is like, pertaining to young children playing the game and their particular coaches. I'm not on about the academies at the ages of 14, 15, 16, where they're developing a tactical awareness. This is solely looking at it from that real youth level, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, those year olds, as the foundations are really set within the sport. And as I say, these managers that really want to try and add and influence in ways that are just taking away from what the game truly is. The game should be the biggest teacher at that level. But yeah, if you're talking about a pet hate, that would like really scream alarm bells in my head as bringing that forth. And I think the key thing any kind of parent wants to see is an opportunity. And that's what any player actually wants, is an opportunity to go to the next level. And I think from today's podcast, like, if people allow themselves to truly listen, there will be many opportunities to take key things away to allow them all to get into better positions. So allow yourselves just to sit back and explore with us as we go through this, because I really believe there's going to be some key transformative takeaways.
And that topic for myself has always been one of the most interesting ones, because you have academies attempting to build world-class players that are worth millions of dollars. And so they overcoach, they try to create this framework and say, okay, we have to do X many hours of ball drills. We have to do this many hours of work on tactics, and yet the player is like 11 years old. But after all those decades of, let's say, development and academies in the UK and Europe, kind of making these so-called frameworks, they still end up going and buying players from Brazil, Argentina, that were developed on the court without any kind of systematic coaching, and didn't really even know basic tactics of full-sided football until they probably got into, let's say, 17 years old, 18 years old, got into, actual men's football. So for me, it's one of the interesting things seeing how the players that come from these unstructured backgrounds actually go way farther than the players that are overcoached at a young age, because some young coach wants to have the position of a Pep and say, "Oh, I made this guy. I taught him how to be the inverted fullback when he was 9 years old, and I'm the reason that he got to Chelsea or Arsenal or something or other." But in reality, most of those players retire when they're 16, or they stop playing because they just their love of the game got sucked dry. Know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. A lot of the players become sanitized, and what I mean by that, if you allow yourself to look at a newborn, a baby, and what we end up doing is, if we over sanitize them, they don't actually build up their own understanding and resistance towards the world, their own level of immunity. These coaches end up over sanitizing these young players, and they don't know what to do or how to do it, because the only answer that's ever come to them is from the coach, and they've never been put in a position of being able to work things out. So when you refer to South America, etc., like that. We can look at Africa as well. Um, Players, these young players, just get anything that's around. It could be a football. If you go back years, it was a pair of socks, it was a piece of fruit, and they would just go out onto the street and they would do their keepy uppies, or they would just play street football. I grew up playing cage football. That was the main thing that I ended up doing as a youngster before I was in any academy, was just hours upon hours in a cage. And the beautiful thing about that is that you have to find solutions. Like, there's no one there to turn to. You're put up against so many different players that you're having to think to yourself of, how do I get into situations? How do I get out of situations? Whereas what I've found, and it is, I get the opportunity of observing football every Sunday before I play, and it is these youth academy approaches that more often than not, these managers are trying to hyper instruct players to do things or be in positions or take their authoritative note over than the actual manager being able to orchestrate what is fun for these youngsters. How can I get them to understand that making mistakes are absolutely fine, and then try and get them to work out what the solution is amongst that. Yeah, I really think, especially in the world that we're in as well. So if you look at it through the lens of social media, everyone wants to make a name for themselves, and unfortunately they do that at the expense of these youngsters and their development. And realistically, if you was able to just let the youngsters shine, I think most people will shine more themselves as a byproduct of that.
And that, let's say that conundrum or that a phenomenon is reflected in the market value of players from Brazil, and even the best players from the UK are still the ones that have more time on the court, more time playing cage football than not. And there's a podcast that I did, like, I think a year ago or so, where some like uh, some like medium sized UK Instagram page that talks about football, and they try to get their advice direct to parents, just still couldn't grasp the idea that your son or your daughter, if they're in high school or younger, need to be playing cage football. And and the idea that playing cage football is more important than doing passing patterns was almost ridiculous, when you have so many players coming from South London in that small neighborhood where all they're doing is cage football. The same thing in the same exact thing in the suburbs of Paris, and of course in many favelas in Brazil, Argentina, and Africa as well. So it's like people just don't want to, like, look in the mirror, and they don't want to, like, they want to trust, let's say, science from a local university saying that 10-year-olds should be doing gym training, and then somehow they use that as an excuse to not be playing cage football.
Yeah, look, I would always say, like, different strokes for different folks. All right, different people will gravitate towards different information, and what they believe will work for them will ultimately be the thing they do. And some people will reap some rewards, but if you just boil it down, like, a young individual is going to need the faculties to overcome problems in life. Forget football for the second. This is just general good human nature. If me as a young person was put into a situation where I had to think and draw upon different resources and communicate with others and problem solve and take leadership at parts and take a backseat in other parts, like, they're all key core fundamental skills that will allow me to apply them in a multiplicity of different ways, which is inclusive of playing football. So as a byproduct of my young exposure and just what I shared there, like, I became pretty much captain of every team. And the two teams I was not captain of my whole life, I was still seen as the captain because of the way I communicated and spoke. That didn't come because I spent hours on a one-on-one with a coach as a youngster doing, whether it was passing drills. It came because of the position I was playing as a youngster meant if I didn't use my voice, others around me couldn't see the game that I could see. Because I started out as a goalkeeper before I went into centre back and played at that level there. I then was able to know that I can see the game and speak the game. So I developed this skill set. And whatever position I played, it became my primary skill set of how to communicate in advance. If I didn't have that as an upbringing, then would I have that now? The answer is less likely. It's not likely that I would have that skill set. So if you're going to sit there and think about, my child needs one-to-one coaching, allow yourself to break down what are all the key characteristics that they're going to get and what are the key characteristics that they're going to miss out upon in terms of personal building, let alone any footballing aspect. We can touch upon that in a second. But from a personal perspective, I think 9 times out of 10, you're going to get more from exposing the child into situations where, of course, you want a level of safety about it so it isn't challenging what safety does or doesn't mean, but the opportunity for them to problem solve, for them to come out and grow, and for them to work as a unit, as a team in tandem with others, not as an individual the whole time. We've grown into a society where we're really trying to value the individual over everything. And the individual has to stand out in some way, shape, or form. That's what we're trying to share within the term talent. That you are playing on an 11-a-side game, and you've got to realize that there are roles to be played within that. And if you can't compute that, then it's no wonder why players drop out at the age of 16, 17, 18 when they find out, oh, it's no longer just about me. This is about a collective skill set that I'm needed to show as well.
Now, in terms of the parents trying to find the best quality of coaching, I know that you always say if you want better answers, you've got to ask better questions.
Yeah.
So, what do you think for any a football parent out there that has a young player that loves the game, or maybe their son or daughter doesn't love the game, but the parent loves the game more than
Yeah.
them. But
Yeah.
what kind of questions should they be asking
Yeah.
to get the best quality of environment to develop?
I think themselves as adults can look at their child as a player and ask themselves, like, what skill sets does my child have? All right. So I will say it from a footballing perspective. I believe players are skill sets, not positions. And once you identify those skill sets, they can then be used in a load of different ways within a particular system. And we may become more accustomed to a certain position, but just because we're there doesn't mean that we can't do other things to influence the whole style of play. So if I look at a young child and go, what skills have you got? Are you a good communicator? Or are you someone that needs help in that particular position? Do you have the ability to be really agile and nimble? And do you find that you can dart in and out of players? Or are you someone that's quite strong? You've got this unique eye for goal where you can turn around and hit the ball in different ways and it just seems to travel. So if you take on board what the skill set is, it then becomes easier when you're looking at what coaching avenues are available to then undertake, because you can then start to ask the coach, what principles do you use here? Or do you look to use a particular system? And then they will start to have a conversation back with you. And if they're completely system driven, you already understand that your child has a skill set. And if that does or doesn't marry up, me personally, as a coach, so looking at how I like to work with players, I like to use different principles with different players. And that means that they can be malleable, they can be changed depending on what's coming up for the individual. I like that as a development piece more than anything. And I would say more so in youth football, they need to understand more about the principles of play and more about the opportunity of going out there, making mistakes and learning from them. And when I say principles of play, I don't want people to sit here and think like these high end principles. It's just simple things of what is passing, what is 1-2, what is moving into space. If I do this here and move, that's all they need to start to understand, that the game moves in this particular way. We're trying to go towards this goal. We're trying to defend here. And then as you build their competence and confidence, you can layer in a few other pieces. But aside from that, they don't need to be overthinking things. There's a reason that the game has changed so much for youth levels over the years, where now you're looking at opposition sides retreating for goal kicks because they want to encourage more time on the ball. If I go back to me being a young goalkeeper, like all I was ever told to do from a goal kick is try and get that halfway line. And as a youngster, sometimes it would go there, sometimes it would go to the edge of the penalty area, and they'd be on the opposition for a counter attack. And then I lived with fear inside of me going, oh, I don't want to make another mistake. I don't want to make another mistake. If we're able to take those situations around where we can reduce the likelihood of fear, we're going to encourage expression. And every young player with their skill set, we want to try and allow them to express themselves, to find out what their true talent is, and that any mistake is absolutely fine. It's the most beautiful thing. Why? Because we've got the opportunity to learn from it. And if you can even drill that mindset in, if a young player can allow themselves to have that mindset as a youngster, and they transfer that into the later stages, like they're more likely to overcome big problems, big adversity far quicker than someone else. And like, for instance, I will use Cole Palmer because I watch Cole Palmer a lot. If you watch him, he has this unique, nonchalant attitude, not in a way that is arrogant, but just like, oh, it's happened. I'll get on with it. Here's the next thing that's about to happen. There isn't a time to dwell on it. 44,000, jeers or boos. It doesn't want to affect him in that same way. England in the Euros of a final where I've just got to come off the bench and I just want to infect the game in some particularly scores. I've got that kind of feeling on the inside where things don't bother you in the same way because you made a million and one mistakes and they've always been treated as fine, as in what's your next step is the most important thing. You're going to yield a lot more. And I think that if we allow ourselves, and parents especially, to try and circulate what they want to try and achieve with a youngster in that particular way, then they're more likely to be fruitful for their child's development at the end of the day.
Spot on. I think one of the biggest things there that some parents are scared of is letting go and allowing their developing player, their daughter or son, to problem solve, like you're saying. Because the reason why Cole Palmer or Messi, Ronaldo, any of these really really great players that are the so-called X factor on the field, like that, the one guy that can do something special, and thus are usually the most valued player of the club, is because their ability to problem solve is at a higher wavelength, at a higher frequency than any of the other players. And so that's what makes them special. So if as a parent or as a youth coach, if you overcoach or you overparent or you tell your tell your kid to stop playing other sports and to specialize in football when they're 8 years old, you are cutting off the influx of new information, which is going to expand their movement vocabulary.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and we can even look at it at a slightly simpler level with just general behaviour. But if a young child, a toddler, 1 or 2 years old, falls on the floor, and all of the reaction around them is to go, the likelihood is then that child is then going to cry. But if that child just falls down on its backside and everyone cheers and goes, "Yay!" the child is more likely going to have this positive reaction towards it, and it isn't a big thing. And just let parents try and translate in that into other areas of what they're trying to achieve. Like, it's okay to fall down, and it's also okay to give a reinforcement that allows them to see the next step has all the possibility in them, rather than what should I now fear about this particular action. And I think that's just some of the key stuff. We can look at it from simple behavior measures and just allow that to translate into the game and go, how does the game mold my child, rather than how do I mold my child to the game? I think that's going to be something that's really key within what we're trying to see and achieve out there.
Yeah, that reminds me of how many young footballers ask, like, how can I shoot like Ronaldo, or how can I run like Messi, or trying to copy these famous players. And of course, you should watch and learn from great athletes and great movers, but ultimately, you are your own system. You are your own body. You are your own human being. So the more you run away from molding yourself, the more of a copycat of a robot that you'll be on the pitch, and thus your ability to problem solve and to adapt is going to be very limited.
100%. Um, what I would also say is, like, it's absolutely fine to look at players and go, oh, what technique do they use to achieve that? Like, that's fantastic. We're trying to understand a particular technique, but once you're out there, what is actually applicable to me? What is actually happening with me in and around the pitch? And how does my body navigate into certain positions for me to then execute? And the way that you execute is going to be completely different to a Cristiano Ronaldo or any player, because that's where your uniqueness comes. So you can learn the technique. You can go, oh, Travella, outside foot. That means that I've got all these passing options available to me. But at the same time, you're not going to hit a Travella the same way that you might have seen a Quaresma 10 years ago doing, for instance. That's so unique to him and his style. You just need to understand, do I have an awareness of the technique? Do I use the technique? Fantastic. But what does my body position allow me to actually do? The way that I maneuver, the way that I think, the way that I feel about the game. And that's where I say, like, players are skill sets, not positions. Let's learn what your skill set is. Of course, enhance it. There is technique available to do that. But at the same time, most players don't know what their specialist skill sets are. and they think they need to be someone else rather than honing into what makes them truly valuable and stand out on a football pitch and blend in with the rest of the team as well. Because both things more often than not have to happen. You can't have 11 Cole Palmers on a pitch. Basically, there can be a few of those, and then you have to realize that every other player has unique talents, are equally as important to making the system work, and there will be other players that fall into those categories as well. So yeah, I tend to think it from that 360 view. But again, like, learn the technique, but use it into who you are rather than what you're trying to think you need to be.
Yeah, something you mentioned there just reminded me of even beyond the idea of young players specializing too early in the football. Even the idea of young players too early specializing into their position, into being a fullback or a center back or a six or an eight. If your son or daughter's 9 years old, it doesn't matter. They they should become a good footballer and not think about how can I be a good right back, you know?
Yeah.
Because then again you are limiting how their brain thinks. You are shrinking the size of their mental sandbox of what options can I do on the pitch to, get the ball from here to there and ultimately win the game. And that it's like when a player is like really good at fullback, but then you ask them to play like as a 10, and they've lost that ability to play with their back to goal or to play in between the lines, and you've totally shrunk the paradigm from which they operate.
Yeah, I think, look, an exposure at a young age is so important to all these different positions. Like, normally, the best player on the team is actually going to be the best player in every position. All right, they're going to be the one that's most comfortable on the ball. They're going to understand how to beat players, whether they're left back or up front, and that's inclusive of being in goal. They're more likely to be a braver person by way of diving and stuff like that. It's really important to use that and go into different positions because, one, that strong player will get stronger. You may not realize it in the short term. You may be sitting there thinking, oh, like my son or daughter is a striker. I need to see them up front all of the time. That's the position that we're going to go for. And lo and behold, if memory serves me correct, like players like Glenn Johnson, Reece James, there's be another host of players as well, used to be strikers up until a certain point, and then they got put into their systems, and their system went, no, actually, you're going to go into this position here, centre midfield or right back or full back. So they get completely changed around, and then that's become alien to them because for so many years they've been in this one position. Now, luckily, coaches and scouts, etc., get to see what skill sets are and where players may be valuable as a byproduct of that. But in terms of the individual, it then takes them a period of time to adapt and adjust to it. Whereas if you're a youngster and you've got that experience of being able to hold the ball up, whatever that may mean to that individual, and whether they're turning with it or laying off a 1-2, etc., like that, then later on down the line, they may revisit that position and go, oh, I've got a grounding in the skill set. I have some sort of familiarity of how I may play when I turn up in this position. So again, like, absolutely spot on. I think like players should not be bound by positions. We should try and get people into different situations, different scenarios, even going as far as trying to remove the language around the positions as such. You're always going to need a basic framework, but when you introduce them, how are we looking at getting players in different areas of the different pitch or different parts of the pitch and what they're trying to then achieve? They should be trying to achieve the same thing by way of, can I stop the ball? Can I give the ball? Can I move into some space? And can we get in a position where we're going to shoot the goal? It should be really basic as that. And then when we're defending, can we have one person travelling towards the ball? Can we make sure that we're standing alongside other players that we're marking? And then can we try and retrieve that ball? Like, really simplistic things. None of this is overcooking the pot, so to speak. But again, those players should be able to go all over the pitch and make mistakes and get successes and build from this foundation rather than being told at a young age. I was a goalkeeper at a young age because I was the most daring when it came to being able to dive for the football. And I had this really, loud voice that could paint pictures for others. And then when I got older and started playing semi-pro and that, I was into centre back. I moved across position and stuff. And I had a foundational skill set, but something that didn't come until later on in life is actually playing with the ball in terms of just moving the ball 5 yards into space and how that changes everything. And I remember I used to get really nervous doing it as a young teen into my early 20s. Other people would commend me and say, oh, Callis, like, drive with the ball again. And in myself, I wouldn't know what I've just done because I'm so not used to doing it. Like I could trap the ball, I could ping the ball where you wanted because I grew up taking goal kicks and doing stuff like that. But in terms of just moving into space, that took me a good 6, 7 years, probably at the age of 26, 27, that I started going, oh, actually, I feel really comfortable when I get the ball. I'm going to knock it there. I moved into that space. And I need that player to make that particular run. I know I've got the communication to tell him early, make the run. So for me, I'm just reflecting as a youngster going, I wish that I had been given that opportunity of playing in different positions or encouraged to do that rather than going, well, I'm the bravest, so I'll go and goal because I want to dive everywhere on concrete. It didn't shape my game with the best opportunity going forward. And I had to learn things a lot later. And that's because I stuck at it later. You know, I'm 38 now, still playing the game, still loving it, still learning. But I had to learn some of those things at 27, 26. Really, I should have learned them a lot younger than that to give me a more foundational template to be able to play the game from.
I think you bring up a great point while you're talking there about like obviously all the benefits of cage football, small-sided football, where players because obviously like when you're playing full-sided games, there is a clear system. You have forwards, defenders, midfielders. There's a very clear distinction of where you're supposed to stay on the
Yeah,
field. But playing cage football, you're exposed to more or less all the positions, or, or you should be at least.
yeah,
And so players develop more, let's say, organically. So, Stephen, if I was a parent and I had a few young aspiring football players, most of the coaches of academies and grassroots, they're telling me, oh, I need to have my son doing extra shooting drills or doing ball mastery and going and doing passing patterns with this coach and learning how to execute like the 4-3-3. Now, why is that approach wrong?
it goes back to kind of my opening spiel about the fact that these individuals are not going to be getting all these kind of extra developmental skill sets that are required. You're really just segregating a particular part of a particular phase of football to try and enhance them through by way of repetition and then reinforcement of the coach going, good job. They're then going to be seeking that level of approval every time, everything that they do. That's all you're drilling into them is going, I've done this. I need the words good job to me. Whereas realistically, you want to go, what's next? What's next? What the player should have that, when you're in the cage and you've won the ball, you've lost the ball, your teammate aggressively shouts at you or someone says, look, come on, like you've got this, like I believe in you. That's coming from the people that you're actually playing on the field with, which means your next action is about to happen because of that. Not because you're looking at a result and going, oh, where's the manager over there? What are they going to tell me what to do next? So I think in terms of just generalized education, how the format is taking place, more often than not, and this is a principle I use when I coach as well, more often than not, isn't the right choice to take. In some circumstances, if it's like, right, we're going to spend a month once a week and we're just going to see if we can do these sessions to brush, okay, there may be some value in that. But more often than not, 90% of the time, in that cage where lessons are being organically taught, playing against different people, different personalities, different characters, and learning a little bit more about yourself as a human is going to be far more valuable. When you go to these different trials and stuff like that, you're thrown in. You're given different people to play against. You've got teammates that you don't know, and you've got to learn in a short space of time, how can I forge a relationship and how can I know that I need to do certain things for myself here? Because at the end of the day, when you're in a team environment, but you're trying to get the eyes on you, you still have to have your level of uniqueness shine. But if all you've ever done is this 1v1 or 78% of the time I've gone lots of 1v1 and missed out on this whole education, I'm not going to know how to fight on the football pitch. And of course, I don't mean physical fight, but I mean fight to go, I want to be the one that makes the next level. I'm ready for it. I'm showing you that I'm here for this. I've seen this on the pitch that turns up. I've filled that gap or I've taken this opportunity. You just don't get that in those environments where it's continually 1v1 training. And it was my biggest bugbear in the lockdown. I think I may have shared this before, like the likes of Marcus Rashford, and they were all sharing their 1v1 personal training session. And then all I'm hearing is these youngsters talk about their 1v1 session. It's like, no, like this really isn't an important part. Like you're having to learn so many more key skill sets rather than going, oh, I need a personal trainer. Like, you will pick up so many traits as a byproduct from exposure to the game, or as youngsters, and we often speak about it, is getting movement vocabulary from an array of different sports. You're going to pick up things as a byproduct of that, and then keep honing that, keep refining that within the game. And again, I'll use Cole Palmer because it's the easiest one. Like, his dad stopped him doing all these other curricular things, like going to the gym, getting stronger, so just to focus on the game. Because one, he believed that his son would physically grow because he used to be quite small and quite short. So he believed that his son would physically grow. But if he focused just on the footballing aspect of it, he'll have time for that later. He knew that it was going to be the footballing aspect that got him to the next level. So right there is understanding, like, the key to success is he played the game to get there, and his dad was able to see that playing the game is the most valuable part to that. And then later on, whatever he's now choosing to do is down to him, and that's a different question. But getting to that point, playing the game.
Mhm. Yeah, something that I saw from a lot of parents while I was coming through academy and also now, of course, as a coach, is some of the parents are so fixated on short term results, so that they see, oh, on the weekend that their son missed a shot or that he's not running all over the pitch. So they fixate on this one specific symptom of talent, and then say, oh, we got to take that and go train it directly. But then what they're missing out on, the cost of opportunity,
Yeah.
is training the whole system so that they can holistically improve every attribute across the board, so that they're good enough at age 15 or 16 to play at the highest level of academy and then eventually men's football. But when you fixate on short term, let's say short term symptomatic characteristics, you miss out on the whole map, let's say, that even because there's players that make it to the highest level that maybe their shooting isn't perfect, but
Yeah.
because they're so well rounded and they have all the pieces in place, they can hold their own and they can get there. But then you have some kids that, like, they're fantastic at shooting, but only in a like a very isolated uh, in a very isolated situation in a match, but they don't have the whole skill set that is only possible to get from playing lots of real football and cross training. And I think that that's the biggest distinction that parents and hopefully players and hopefully coaches can take from what we're talking about, is that you cannot do the work that the court's going to do.
Yeah.
Like, the game is going to develop players in the best way possible, because it's just like humans trying to out engineer nature. It's just not going to work. And anytime humans try to build technology to replace the sun or to replace all the seasons of the year, it's a losing battle. So the more that you lean into nature and let's say natural development, I think for the better. Hmm?
100%. Like, being nurtured by nature, like, I don't think we would have enough words to be able to describe how valuable that is. And we all just know that there's so much science for and against anything. And even what I'm saying here in terms of nature, there can be so much science for it. But forget that for a second. If you just spent time outside, if you've been on the computer the whole day and then you allow yourself to walk through the park, I believe 99.999% recurring of the time, you're going to feel an internal difference, whether that's less stress, decreased anxiety, general feeling of wellness, being able to breathe a little bit easier, whether my eyes have looked panoramic and I've been able to see more colors more vibrantly. There's going to be so many benefits. So being nurtured by nature doesn't need science to tell you how valuable that is as a framework. And then just allow yourself to try and apply that into different areas. And when it comes to anything, like one of my coaching principles is like variety is the spice of life, which is a normal saying, but continuity leads to stability. So, i.e., if you're consistently playing the game of football, you're going to yield results just by turning up. By more often than not, just being there and exposing yourself to cage football, you're going to get benefits. The variety being that you're going to turn up in all these different scenarios in different areas of the pitch, because there are no real rules. You know, it is just lads' rules on the day, whatever that may be. We all know what a foul is and stuff like that. We all know what a handball is. There isn't anyone refereeing the game. You referee it yourself. You build your own kind of boundaries and barriers. And you're getting this unique variety within the structure of consistently playing the game, and things will just happen as a byproduct. It's like handwriting. You only get better at handwriting by doing it. You can't have someone instructing you, hold the pen like this and turn it at this particular. It's going to be awful. And you build up a level of fluidity and fluency around that over a long period of time, just by doing the thing. And then as we get a little bit older, we don't have exams in the same way anymore. So I don't write 3-hour exams anymore like I did at university. I will then lose that skill set. I will lose that fluency and fluidity surrounding the handwriting after a period of time. If I turn up more often than not, if I'm doing that thing more often than not, I'm going to regain or enhance that skill set. And that's no different to playing the game.
Okay. So now, if I'm a parent, I am convinced I'm going to get my son or daughter playing small sided games all the time, having fun and all this stuff. Now, let's say there is some kind of functionality issue that is holding back the basic functionality of their body from running or from jumping or from hitting a football correctly. What kind of approach do you take for gait and sport and movement quality?
Yeah. I think I'll look at this from two lenses. So look, one of the things that held me back was I had Osgood-Schlatter's disease in both knees. All right, so primarily muscles and bones grow at different rates, especially when you're going through growth spurts. And then there was a small swelling that developed underneath the knee, and that caused immense pain whenever I would run and go down on the knees. All I ever was told was just rest is the answer. Was just rest. No one understood that I had flat feet was what I was told. I was in certain body positions the whole time. So I could describe those positions, but what I don't want to do to anyone listening is start to put something inside their head that they're wrong. What I want to try and encourage through my language is a variety of good movements over a period of time. So even if you are stuck in a particular position, and I'll touch on this in a second, I don't want that position to be a defining factor or something that is wrong with you. It's just that the question I would then ask is, what movements am I yet to experience to allow me to feel something different? And then when I get a little bit of fluidity between these movements, is that suffice enough to be able to perform in a way that I haven't performed before? My experience leads to the answer yes, and whether mechanics change by way of posture or movement can happen as a byproduct of consistency over a period of time, but it doesn't necessarily mean 100% that what I'm doing right now is wrong. It's just I haven't experienced other things yet. I think a lot of the world is looking for a diagnosis, and then we attach towards a diagnosis, and that becomes us, and that becomes our limitation, it becomes our excuses, it becomes what, I had a long period of time, 5 years, where I dealt with Osgood-Schlatter's before I came back, and that's where I came back as a centre back, and I've gone on and moved on to semi-pro football. I've played my whole life ever since. All those things happened not because I accepted the term Osgood-Schlatter's disease. If you look at the word disease, and we're there to go, oh, that means there's no cure for this, there's no change in this. Where actually there are a number of things along that journey. So that's me sharing a little bit about my journey. When I look at it from anyone else's perspective, like one of the earliest things I like to understand is through an assessment, and the assessment has changed for me over the years. So originally an assessment would have been, from the framework of what I know, what is wrong with the individual. And look at what I just said a moment ago, that is now a complete contradiction of how I think. Actually, an assessment is allowing me to see, as a coach, as someone who's got a honed eye on my own movement and movement therapy, where do I wish to start with you? And that's inclusive of listening as well, because I want to always take on board someone's history, someone's current thoughts and feelings, because that's really going to be paramount to then what we decide to do next in relationship to movement. And then what does the assessment tell me as an opportunity of going, well, well, you set up like this, and then you're telling me that your lower back is feeling X, Y, and Z. Maybe I'll work on some posterior expansion. All right. And all I mean by that is when I breathe, can I get the back of the rib cage to start to pull backwards a little bit? There's more detail in it. When I allow myself to look more specifically, so i.e., I have like a particular way that I like to look at things, and I've got like a 4-stage approach. More often than not, from my experience, most things can either be a byproduct of a breathing pattern that is happening or a breathing pattern that isn't happening. So if I can get someone to improve their intracavity pressure when they inhale, we expand slightly. When we exhale, we allow ourselves to shrink slightly. That isn't just the lungs, that is also inclusive of the diaphragm working, the pelvic bowl, the cranium. There are these small kind of tidal waves where we open and close, we grow and shrink. If I can get someone to improve that as a principle, as a skill set, more often than not, things start to improve generally. And I'm always working in tandem, as I say, with the player, with the client on this. So, for instance, say it was a shoulder issue. If I can get the back of the rib cage to expand, and now the shoulder blade allows itself to glide a little bit differently, and they can now access a range of motion that they couldn't have before, that there has been a valuable starting point, the breath work, because it's allowed the mechanical structure to change and you experience something slightly different. That's pretty much 360 degrees. So even if it's the foot and the ankle, I still want to have a look what's happening. Then if, say, someone goes to me, oh, it's what's happening at the ankle and the foot. I want to ask myself, can a foot and an ankle act like a foot and an ankle? Can it do the things a foot and an ankle is designed to do? Once we have that, and we've done it under a couple of different scenarios, it's just general movement, maybe there's a little bit of intensity around it. I then go, can the foot and the ankle now start to build a relationship with the shin, the tibia, the knee as it likes to go into flexion, the femur as it likes to articulate in the back of the hip socket, the hip, the pelvis, etc. It goes a little bit more global by way of the movement. So, and again, this is just pertaining to the gait cycle. The ability to walk, run, change direction, throwing can be a part of that as well. And then I'll look at that as an integrated movement pattern. So now can I start to move more dynamically? So it's something that starts real small and local. I then build it out a little bit longer. I then look to pack it towards how does movement look. And then that final layer will be more sports specificity attached to it. So if is the foot and ankle, I've asked myself, can the foot and ankle act like a foot and ankle? Now can it act like a foot and ankle in relation to the sport? Do I get some ankle stiffness? Can I make sure that the ball of the foot has got a nice surface area for me to be able to pivot and change direction from? So it's not as complex as what people think it should be. They're looking for this one little magic answer. And I think if we just allow ourselves experience what good movement is for that individual, a lot of things just tidy up along the way. And then we've kept it in that timeline of what does it mean at the end for me and my sport. And then you get ready to go again.
Yeah, there was another podcast that I was hearing last week that I think brought up a point that is super relevant to what you said about the movement quality that a young athlete develops playing football in a small-sided, unstructured environment is so different than the movement quality, or let's say the sprint technique that a young player is gonna is going to show when they're working with some one-on-one trainer or a coach, where they're being told to run like this, or to swing their arms like a robot, or to lift their knees up. They're just kind of like being told this external cue that has no relation to why their body is exhibiting a certain pattern of movement when they do a certain thing. But
Yeah.
just the added, let's say, intensity, or the added competition of other opponents, the fact they're in a flow state, they're having fun, they're playing a game that has very simple but direct rules, allows for the mind to just forget about trying to trick their body into better technique, and just allow, again, them to problem solve and to develop something subconscious that will take them for decades into their career.
Yeah. And I think you said something there that's really valuable. So, i.e., the child that is working with the one-on-one coach, say they get that old school cue of like knees up when you're running, for instance. They're trying to think about running while running. which is absolutely crazy. I'm trying to think about the thing that I'm actually doing while doing it. Realistically, I want to work on a set of principles that may allow me to experience the movement away from it. And when I'm actually doing the thing, just do the thing. Like when I get my players to sprint and I'm observing their sprint, I just want them to sprint. I just want them to sprint. Look at a target, sprint. Assess maybe how you feel amongst it. Am I at the right capacity to go 0 to 100? Do I need to do something in between that to allow me to feel like I can then go all out? Okay, those are fine. But as they're going through the movements, I'm not asking them to hold anatomical positions. Like imagine playing the game, thinking about doing the step overs. The moment's gone. Like it's a level of fluidity about what you've done previously that allows you to feel comfortable in those positions, and the moment has just turned up and I've allowed myself to feel that moment. It's just a feeling that I've gone and done. That's where you see the best things in the game, not sitting there going, if I just do this flip flap in a minute, oh, they've tackled me. So it's the same for anything that's movement based as well. Like allow yourself to be in the moment, in that flow state, visualize or put your eyes towards one particular target if you're running and just run towards it and see what the body does. And then you should really be in conversation with people that have got more knowledge than you, more of a skill set than you, so you can then converse and build and formulate a plan that can leave you in a better situation than you're currently at. And that's where we come into play ultimately. That's what we've done for a good number of years now, is improve the multiplicity of different players, all different levels by way of movement and their movement relationships. And then as a result of that, what they're doing on a football pitch, yeah, we're part of that testament of the journey, but also they, the player themselves, have allowed themselves to go 360 degrees. What does my life need to improve or look like to improve as a player? And then they're the ones yielding the results on the football pitch.
Yeah, I think that's a really solid point to sum up the whole conversation of what's wrong with youth football in the UK, in the USA, and definitely in some other countries like Australia, Canada, other more westernized countries that are an example of overcoaching, overthinking, over architecting, trying to control everything when the magic of the court is something that's unquantifiable, that creates elite Neymar level movement quality. And it's not rocket science. I mean, those countries develop top talent for a reason,
Yeah,
and you can't build them in a factory, you know. And
yeah,
even there's like, of course, there are clubs like Ajax and Anderlecht that are known for like very excessive ball mastery work. But the funny thing is many of the best players that even come through that system still are the ones that had more of a touch point with street football, futsal, a 5v5, and even players like Luis Suarez came through Ajax, sure, but I mean he's from Uruguay, you know, like it's not like Ajax made him from a kid level, you know, they just kind of gave him like the finishing touches, right?
yeah,
And I
yeah,
find that so funny where like other people in the UK, they'll use these studies, whatever these stats, say, oh, like almost all players in the Premier League came through academies. Well, no shit, you know, because the, any good player that's 14 years old goes to an academy because that's where the other good players are.
yep, yeah,
And the only way that good players become great is by playing with other good players and being pushed and
yeah,
having competition. So it's like the most like what like just one of the most brain dead opinions I've ever seen in football. And
yeah,
it's, you can't read, you cannot read between the lines and just look at real life and look at, oh wait, like of course those players came through academies. It doesn't mean the academy made the guy. In the same way that, yeah, there's a video of Messi doing like bicep curls in the gym, it doesn't mean that he's became Messi doing bicep curls. Just
that's it.
common sense.
Yeah.
But I think these days that common sense is becoming very, very uncommon.
Yeah, and look, I don't always blame the parents for that. I mean, there is
Yeah, yeah.
a multitude of different ways that they're receiving information, and they want to make the best decision they can, and also quite often the most popular one will be the one that people go with,
Yeah.
go onto Amazon reviews and I'm going to buy something and that review over there's got 1,005 stars and the other one over here hasn't got that. Okay, I'm going to trust the reviews. Like that is just a byproduct of it. The more important thing is then to ask yourself actually what questions have I asked surrounding it. And again, I'll go back to one of those principles that you had shared earlier. The quality of my life is dictated by the quality of question I ask. So I have to learn how to ask better questions if I really want some serious answers and change. Allow yourself to go through a period of asking questions and ask questions that are for it, ask questions that are against it, and then start to go out to the people that have got the opposing views. And that's what I've always liked to do. Like anything in this fitness industry, I've been coaching for 19 years now, that I've gone down a rabbit hole. I've done my absolute utmost to go to the polar opposite view, the contradictory view, and see how that stands true. And if there is something that rings as true in there, that reigns as true, then that either challenges me to go, is what I'm currently believing able to overpower that, allow me to feel stronger in my belief, or does that start to change my course of direction? And that's how I've been able to get to these situations now where, for me as a coach, everything is really refined and I understand it. Doesn't mean that I don't develop upon it, but it just means that I'm really confident and competent in what I deliver and how I deliver it. But if I didn't ask those questions all those different times, I wouldn't have got to these parts now. And that's no different from the parents who've got to go underneath it a little bit and go, let me ask the questions, let me reflect on it. What's the opposite saying? Oh, yeah, well, that challenges it there because it's just speaking about playing football more. Whereas this one over here is saying, actually, if you come and work with me one for 10 hours, etc., compute it for yourself for a change. And something that I was reflecting on was an agent's conversation. And it was relating to Chelsea Football Club and the amount of young players that they're purchasing overseas for big money. And actually, the agents and of the players at the club were more supportive or quite supportive of this action, because what that means is they're getting the best of the best to try and come in here. And that will then mean that that level of the traditional academy player should rise, or the people that do rise stay and the people that don't rise go, which is fantastic. But the question people need to ask before that is, why is it they're needing to go to Brazil, South America to raise the standard that's here? What is it they're doing? Well, actually, their whole relationship with football is entirely different still to what the academy is over here. But the language that we're using, and as I say, I grew up in the streets of South London playing cage football, was that's basically what they're doing, model for model in Brazil. And all right, we can also speak about things like futsal and stuff like that, but what they're actually doing within the game of futsal is encouraging players to be quite aggressive on the ball, to start to feel confident on the ball, that having skills going past players is quite a fun thing, and you're going to make mistakes. It's just an encouragement of a style of a game. That's all they're doing within that particular system. It's no different to what we do in cage football, but I think cage football in itself here in London and some other areas, it's got that aggressive feel to it. And that's always quite nice as well as a development piece, because you stand on your own 2 feet. And it's just then being able to discern what happens on the pitch and off the pitch are two different things.
I think now the question that any footballer or parent hearing this is, then what questions should I be asking my coach or my trainer, or ask myself about what I'm doing? Is it actually working?
Yeah. And look, I kind of said that at the beginning, like take stock of what your child's skill set is, like look at it, learn it as a person, learn it as a player. And then that will allow you to start to route some questions towards, well, I've seen my son or daughter be good at communication or X, Y, and Z. And then if they're really good at communication, then it may be an opportunity to go, will my son or daughter get the captain's armband at some point? These are really valuable questions about how to develop an individual's leadership, because that can be part of it. Or you consistently show my son and daughter as a right back, will they get an opportunity to play other positions? Because I believe they're really good at running a long distance on a football pitch, indicating more maybe a box to box midfielder type. So again, asking that coach, what is their plan as an individual for my child, and how do they see their time within that particular season or time that you spend with them? How do you see that being shaped for them as players, as individuals? And you want to kind of get that feel, in my opinion, that it's all about the youngster's development more than what it is about the coach's say so. I want you in this 4-4-2. You need to run over there. You need to be quiet. That those are the authoritative things that I listen to. And then there's other great examples. This He's a young coach at the place that I play on Sunday, and his level is so good with the youngsters. Like, he drops down onto his knees, so he's of a similar height the whole time. It isn't like this authoritative stance where I'm standing above you as a little youngster, and you may feel intimidated. And he's got these little hoops set up, and he's trying to get the kids to kick the ball through different hoops as part of an activity before they get going in different game situations. And these are youngsters like 5, 6 year olds that he's dealing with. And I think it's fantastic to watch him because he's fully invested. He just cares about the young kids' development. Whereas there's the other coach, which is on the other pitch, and I think they're about the 8 or 9 year olds, and he's completely authoritative in his approach. And I'm like, these lot are just here to be in structured fun, basically. They're all wearing the same uniform, which is their kit. You have some basic understanding of the game of football, but really you should be trying to facilitate fun and changing positions and getting them to grow and understand that we're just trying to score and we're just trying to stop. And you can have a couple of little pieces in between there that help support that, but nothing more than that. So I think if the coach that you speak to is trying to overcomplicate things, it in itself can be the red flag to then reflect and go, actually, what is the opposite direction? And also, it's another easy one, but if you are in a structured system, ask yourself, where do I allow my son or daughter to have unstructured? Where does that fit into what we're trying to do to allow them? Because you may feel safe and secure that your son or daughter is in an environment where that security is taken care of. Maybe you're in a professional school and it's got a nice cage and CCTV. All that will play into a parent's mind of what safety is or isn't. And sometimes playing out in the local cage isn't the most safest thing if you reflect in that way. But also at the same time, where does unstructured come into things? That would be another question that I would look to ask on there. I think more importantly than me trying to second guess is, like, when people listen to this, when parents listen to this, like, pop your questions along, be a little bit more individual with what you want us to speak about, because then I'll be able to break down in detail a little bit more specifically as we go through these podcasts and offer a little bit more individualistic advice rather than, everything now is completely general and observational based off of me. But more importantly, what's actually going on for the people listening. Ask those questions and let us support in that way.
Yeah. I've always thought about, after each session, has the player gotten more elastic? Has the player gotten more
Mm-hmm.
creative? Has their energy, has their ability to produce energy gotten better? I think all these very like simple questions, but are in my research and in my system are some of the main pillars of talent development. And I would be very surprised if any players in academies in America, in the US, and in Australia can actually say yes to those questions. You know, after a session ends with your trainer or even just like your team coach, do you feel more uh, do you feel more expressive? Do you feel more athletic? Do you feel more light on your toes? Are you able to actually walk, jog, sprint longer than you were before? Or are you just tired out and you burn some calories and you're sweaty and that's it? You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they're all great things to reflect upon, and that parents have got the opportunity now to start asking. And as I said at the beginning, like, hopefully by the time they've listened to this, they've had that opportunity to take these things away. Because that is the biggest thing, is actually what are they taking away, what are they implementing, and what are they finding out for themselves. Um, Ultimately, what we're trying to share is that the game will continue to shape the players more often than not better than what we can as people. And that's what happened for us as youngsters. And it was, when I shared about me being a goalkeeper, that was me going through teams and stuff like that. Me playing out in the cage, like, my headers, my volleys were fantastic as a youngster because I was continually exposed to those things. My ability to be able to drop a shoulder into someone was fantastic in there. My ability to beat people from skills was not the greatest because it wasn't what was expressive to me. But cage football allowed me to understand how to fight. And that's probably why I transitioned into a centre back easier. So I just want to discern between the two. When I was speaking about me as a goalkeeper not picking up skills, it's within a structured system. Is someone going to me, right, as the goalkeeper, he played the ball short, and that, like, because everything was dictated to you from the sidelines at that particular point. Whereas when you're outside in the cage, like, there are no rules, and it's for you to stand up or you to feel in your stomach that you've got the ability to try something and do something. So again, go back, ask yourself, where is this unstructured play coming from for my youngster? And if everything is structured, if school is structured, if their fun time is structured, if everything is structured, the likelihood of them being able to make a decision for themselves and be seen by someone who's going to open the door to the next level of football, it diminishes because they're not able to problem solve.
Yeah, problem solving. I think that's like the biggest key point to take away from this episode is your training, your any kind of training, whether it's with a team or on your own. Are you increasing your ability to problem solve?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, guys, we're at the hour. I know, Stephen, you're pretty busy with all your clients. I am too. But look, any parent that has a young developing player that's passionate about the game and wants to build the build the blocks of movement, create all these pillars of talent that we mentioned on the episode, hit the link down below and you can read about our program called Total Footballer, and you can get a personalized development program over the course of 12 months or longer to take your son or daughter or yourself, if you're a player watching this, and actually make some tangible progress to get yourself into the stage where you can problem solve at a higher level and you can express, the aspirations and the dreams that you always have about playing pro football, or if you already are a pro footballer, then playing in the Champions League. I can't fathom how many pro players I've talked to that play, they play third tier in this country, or they play like second tier in Denmark or France, and even their mindset is 1,000 miles away. Is 1,000 miles away from Champions League football. But in reality, if they have even a good half season, they could easily transfer to a club at that level. So it's really like it's a mental paradigm, and I think as players get older, they get locked into a mental paradigm where they don't have that growth mindset that they had as a kid, and whether it's their movement quality, whether it's their ability to problem solve on the pitch, or even just their belief in what they're capable of or how far they can go. It sometimes takes someone unbiased like myself or you, Stephen, to kind of to hit that switch and say, hey, okay, hold on here. Like there's nothing stopping you from doing that.
Spot on.
All right, guys, if you're interested in working with myself or Steven, hit the link down below and you can talk to my team about joining if there's open spot, based on what time you watch this episode. But next week, we'll be back for episode 3. We're doing a series about detailing and investigating what truly is football talent, why there are so many injuries in the football world, why there are so many players working so hard and not really getting the results that they want so bad. There's so much money being spent on physios, acupuncturists, doctors, surgeons, supplements, equipment, gym passes, gym work, all different forms of biohacking, and yet there are still world-class athletes having non-contact injuries, which just blows all that out the door. So this is Football Entangled. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.